Hello, welcome to another edition of Who's Your Caddy? I'm your host, Kelly Singh. In this episode, we are going to be bringing you some of our results from last week and then dive into the upcoming PGA Tour event. This event is the Farmers. So fancy. Not Jake from State Farm, unfortunately. But my co-host Adam is going to give us some background on the course, and we're both going to give you some of our favorite picks for your DFS lineups this week. Let's do it. Adam.
What's up?
Hello. I would like to remind everyone that this podcast is meant not only to help with their DFS game and take it to the next level, but even a prop or two. We've been known to do that. So whether you're a beginner or a seasoned pro, hang out with us, ask your questions in the chat, and let me introduce you to my co-host, the jelly to my peanut butter, Adam Hallas at Mr. Hallas. Woo! Woo! Adam, how did you do last week? Let's just go straight into it.
There was positive ROI, but it was like a smidgen. I don't think I buy a pack of bubble gum, which has gone away. Sad face. But yeah, $12 in, $12.70 out. It was much higher going into the weekend, but things started getting to fade a little bit. And always with those like three round cut tournaments, it makes it a little harder to get some good cash going because you only have one day to really make a move. And most of your players really need to step it up. And Taylor Montgomery, spoiler alert, did not. On the easiest course, shot up +1. So,
yeah, I had some surprises along the way as well. But what I like about what you said, the positive ROI, you put in 12, you got 12 and some change, is that you know that on a larger scale, your picks were valid. They're valid picks. And that's what I strive for every week as well, is just, did I make valid picks? We had 83% of our picks make the cut. If you're new to DFS, you need your picks to make the cut so they continue to generate points for you. So it makes perfect sense that you want them to make the cut, and we gave that to you in spades.
yep. And our average position was 23, which isn't bad.
That's fantastic, actually.
Yeah. So overall, we gave you enough to at least get some positive ROI and get some good cores from it.
And then along the lines of prop betting, I like to throw in what some of the percentages are that they're going to be in the top 20, the top 10, the top 5. What are the predictions? Because that's how I build my prop bets. I enjoy doing those quite a bit. And those end up being pretty profitable as well, because to me, these odds are very forgiving. If you're looking at a top 20, a group that's going to make the top 20, or a single player that's going to make the top 20, there's a really good chance you're going to make money on that. I do, at least.
I mean, especially early on in the season, a lot of these odds that are staked for a lot of these guys that do make the top 20 are like Alex Smalley or EVR. Like, I wouldn't say none of the bigger name people that you typically hear, but as we progress into this PGA/Live, and the names that we typically hear at the top are, I hate to say this, they're getting a little bit older. And so like a lot of those guys that do hang around in the 20s and the 30s will start to creep up a little bit more. And those are the value plays right there.
They are. And we have several of those to discuss today. I found that at least half of my picks were down in the 7.8 range. So that was and less. So that was kind of refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to start there. We're not even necessarily going in. It's kind of in order, but I've kind of structured this more of like, who do I like? We definitely want to talk about where you're spending most of your money,
Mm-hmm.
because you really should be choosing one of these top guys. They're pretty much guaranteed to get through. You need their points. That's why they're so expensive, because they bring a lot of fantasy points.
They do, but also it's what the expectations come with that price tag.
Mm-hmm.
So like last week, Cantlay had a high price tag and then a very high ownership, and he ended up shooting at, I think, a +4 on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so like when you have the most expensive guys and high ownership, you're expecting that guy to be in the top 5. Outside,
Right.
you're losing money on that guy.
Well, why don't you talk about your top guy, because he's also in my list as somebody who has a big edge on the rest of the field as far as projections go, and also really fit for this course.
Yeah, and speaking of course, they're playing 2 courses.
You know what? Back it up. Tell us, Adam, about the course this week.
Yeah. Do a 180. So the course, we're playing 2 courses this week. We're at Torrey Pines. There's a south course, which we get the shot link data. And if you're not familiar with shot link data, that's the data that gives you the shot tracker when you're watching on TV. If you're on your app, it's the one that gives you kind of the play-by-play and the shot projections on what's happening on their guy. So we'll only have that on the south course. We have 2 rounds, north and south. North plays, I would say, fairly easier than the south. South is the tactical course. You're going to need some driving accuracy. You're going to need some accurate long irons. You have some skinny fairways and probably some thick rough. And it's against a coast. And so what's going to happen is they've had some rain, so you're probably going to have a little bit of thicker, I hate this term, moist rough. And so it's going to be long approach plays. So you're looking at 150 to 200 approach. So it's a very long approach. If Brendan Todd was in here, I'd put him in. And so you're looking also at Poet Anna greens, which are very challenging. It has a lower putts made on average here than the average tour event. And that's only mostly speaking on the south course. But it's going to be challenging. Last week I talked about the cut, it being a -6, ended up being -13. So before last week, the average was -6. This week, the average is between even to -2. We could see it even or -1. That being said, it's going to be, the South Course is going to be challenging. It's not going to be the birdie fest that we were used to in the first, I guess, 2 iterations of the PGA season. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Instead of having you dive into your player, you mentioned some things that really help segue into my player. One of them happens to be rostership. I decided this week I was going to not necessarily go for the highest rostership. I wasn't going to necessarily spend the top dollar. And you mentioned challenging greens and lower putting averages. So, Sung J.M., top putting average, at least last week. He was top putting average, first in birdie averages. So, I kind of want to keep Sung J.M. in my lineup this week, 9.9K on DraftKings, projected for a modest 71 fantasy points. And I think that lends itself to what you were talking about, average score being even to -1 or -2. And 16% rostership versus the 24% rostership for Shuffles, Xander Schauffele, lovingly named Shuffles by me. But you, on the other hand, are like, give me the Shuffles with syrup and butter.
Yeah. So I am going to eat that chalk like it is a Golden Corral buffet. So he is the highest owned, most expensive, but he's been playing the Amex in the tournament before that. He's got an early start to a lot of these players, and typically you don't do like recent current trends, but given that he has a good fit for this course, he's been playing well leading into this tournament. I'm going to bite the bullet and pay for Shuffles at being the most expensive because I think he will make the top 5. I mean, for the most part, last week, granted, it was the Amex and it's kind of an easier course to get people in the swing of things. He was in the top 5 or top 10 for most of the weekend and kind of eased back a little bit, but he was killing it. So
yeah, I was thinking about that as I watched the tournament this weekend. He's really, I don't know if making a comeback is quite the right word, but he's really reclaiming his game and he's there to win. He's there to play. That was definitely showing so far this season. Another player that I feel like has been maybe reclaiming their game, showing that they're there to play, Keegan Bradley. Keegs. Really out there making some sort of impact. I was mildly impressed in general so far with the start of this season. So I have him down. He's 67% likely to make the cut, which in perspective is one of the higher numbers. You get into like the 71%, 72 percentile on these big players. So 67% chance of making the cut is really great. 8.9K. I like that. 19% rostership, so kind of still up there. But I don't know. He just kept popping up all over the place. For me, you don't have Keegs, you have Theegs.
I do have Theegs, but overall in my pool, I do have Keegan Bradley. I just wanted to throw in some different players.
Okay.
Yeah,
what do you like about Keegan Bradley?
His name.
So fun to say.
Yeah, Keegan Bradley. We should have a cool name like that. But Keegan offers a wide range of stuff. The only thing I don't like about him is his putting hasn't been great.
That's actually in my notes. Well-rounded, lacking in putting.
Yeah, so his average round is good. Driving distance is there. Driving accuracy is at 50% average. Greens regulation is fairly high. It's his putting that gets him. But the thing that we may like him here is that he does pretty well at difficult courses. He's not really a birdie fest type of guy. And he does well at windy conditions. And not to say that Torrey Pines is going to be windy, but it's against the coast. So the odds are that there may be some wind and some weather that comes into play here. And he's trending okay. His last 5 tournaments, he's gained a smidgen stroke. Around the green's not great. Off the tee, we'll call it even. But tee to green, he's a pretty good ball striker.
Yeah, I agree. I liked him. Like I said, he came up quite a bit when we're looking at course fit against the course model. He's pretty well-rounded in there, but yeah, I'm a little nervous about the putting, but I feel like he's been energized, similarly to how I feel about Shuffles in a way. But who knows? Who knows? I want to talk about Theegala, but I actually have him later on as why play Theegala when you can play someone else. But do you really love Theegala this week?
So I do love Theegala only because he is a West Coast type of guy and he's not bad at putting. I think he'll do good here. His putts per round is better than Keegan Bradley. His greens in regulation, not that great. I mean, it's a little bit less than Keegan's. Driving accuracy, same. Average driving distance, 307. He doesn't do that great in the windy conditions, but in average to difficult courses, he does pretty good. And he's a fantastic putter. So he actually gains strokes where a lot of guys don't. And so he's got great putting. So I'm hoping that he does pretty well at this. And he got second in the Century, miscut the Open, the Sony Open, but his putting was super off there. So I'm hoping that he comes back at Torrey Pines.
Yeah.
And kind of shows up a little bit.
I'm hoping so too, because I really want him to have a great season. I foresaw him having a great season. He's due for a great season. He has the ability to have a great season. He's on my fantasy league. So come on, Theegs, let's do something. Another kind of, well, we should say 8.7K. So Keegan Bradley 8.9, Theegala 8.7. One that's pricier, but I'm trusting the process. The process being I'm checking my course fit. I'm checking my course history. I'm checking my current stats. I'm checking all of the data and the projections. And that's Jason Day at 9.5K. Like I said, feels kind of pricey. I'm going to trust the process. He's projected for the same fantasy points as Keegan Bradley, and Keegan Bradley is $400, $500, $600 less. I can do math. $600 less. 64 projected fantasy points. Slightly lower rostered at 17%. What I like is that he has been somewhat consistent. Tied for 34th last week at the Amex. Tied for 10th at the Century. I like those numbers. Those finishes are good enough. I'm just really struggling with that 9.5K. I don't know. Where are you at on that?
I like Jason Day. I think he's been playing pretty well.
Yeah.
At 9.5, it does feel pricey. Checking my group. Is he in there? I did not pick him this week. And that being said,
price, I think.
Yeah, his price and his approach and putting is not great. I don't think he'll do well here, at least on my model. I built it off of POA and putters, scoring relative of par being average, how people have done here at Torrey Pines overall.
Yours is far more specific than mine. I did not get into the grass type this week, and I really should have. But I do. He is popping up in, I ran 20 entries.
Yeah.
And he is popping up, but not as much as some others. I think he's only looking in, out of 20, he's in 2.
I take that back. So I was looking at a different report. He does pretty well in POA.
Okay, thank goodness, because when I looked at the skills, he was really well-rounded. So I was finding it like a little insane that he would just completely fall apart because of the grass type.
No. I was looking at something else, and I was like, oh, that doesn't make sense. And then I was like, oh, he's really good at POA.
Okay, good. Everyone rewind. Jason Day, if you want to spill the cash, it'll work out.
His approach still sucks, but around the green and putting is fine.
Okay, let's skip ahead then. How about somebody else that's popped up quite a bit in my models, and that's going to be Min Woo Lee. Min Woo Lee, another 9.1, and then we'll get out of these prices. What do you like about Min Woo Lee? Because he is coming up all over my spreadsheet.
He is. Before you're like, I don't see Min Woo Lee.
I did?
Yeah. I thought
no, he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He is in 8 of my 20 lineups, apparently.
Oh, well, let me tell you. In my model, he is like 12th. But driving distance, he's 316. Accuracy, average again, 55%. Greens and regulation is pretty much there. The putts per round, he's around Keegan Bradley range. And when it comes to difficult courses, he rises to a challenge. When putting on POA and greens, he does well. He does a smidgen okay. You know what? Just don't worry about the wind. It's like marginal. But his last 5 tournaments, he's gained 3 strokes putting. He's around the green great, off the tees, been pretty good. He's at 21st American Express, which isn't bad. I mean, I'm sure it was like -14, -15. So yeah, I think he's due. He's only played run round here at the Torrey Pines, but I think he's got a fairly good history.
All right. Well, there you have it. Knocking it down a bit, because a lot of these players are not going to all fit in the same lineup because they're pretty pricey. One that has stood out to me again all over my spreadsheet happens to be Stephan Jaeger, 7.8K on DraftKings, just 7% rostership. However, he looks a lot like Theegala on paper. He's pretty well-rounded, and he's got distance, he's got approach, he's great around the greens. So I'm really liking Stephan Jaeger, especially at 7.8K. Not only that, he is projected 64% to make the cut. Very high odds of making the cut at a very reasonable salary of 7.8, which makes me extremely happy.
Yeah, so I'll say Stephan Jaeger is a good pick, but why pay for Stephan Jaeger when you get his twin, Luke List, who has a fantastic history?
And the same price.
Yeah, the same price. But the Stephan Jaeger is the pivot off of Luke List. Luke List has a fairly high ownership for 78. And so if you're looking for someone that's going to has a 64% chance to make the cut, it's going to be Stephan Jaeger. And so if you're going to flip-flop the two and try to pay a leverage play in order to, enter a big tournament or something like that, I would go with Stephan Jaeger. Luke List has a fantastic history here. He has made the cut for the past 5 years, and it's been an average of top 20 in his history here, winning in 2022. So Luke List and Stephan Jaeger, 7,800 are your heroes of the sevens.
For sure. I love Luke List this week as well. Just throwing that out there. There's this fun little section. Did you want to throw in any of these other guys that you have on your list right now?
I have Eric Cole, 9,000. I think he's going to continue to trend to do well. I won't speak so I talked about List because of those reasons. I think his approach is pretty on. I'll say the one name for your section, but I do want to get to and don't want to forget is Kamish13 on Twitter, his list. So I'll forego my section to kind of poke a little bit at this. Is he asked a question about what do you think about the guys on his list? And his list equals Faves, Homa, Mori, and Day, Unsure, Finau, English, Straka, and Moore, Fade, Cantley, and Theegala. Now it depends what type of tournament you're playing, but Homa, Mori, and Day, I think are all good plays to play. Again, I think it's the type of tournament dependent. Homa has a very good hit course history here. Homa, I found out last year, doesn't play well east of the Mississippi. I don't know what it is, but he's a West Coast guy. Maury's kind of the same way. We talked about him. We've talked about Day. Unsure, Tony Finau, English, and Straka and more. I like the first 3 guys there. I just have Tony Finau in my pool. English is also up there. I think his approach and putting can help here. And I think Straka is kind of the cheaper version of English anyway. Ryan Moore I think it's Ryan Moore. I'm not too keen on him. And I'll say why here in a second. Taylor Moore. I'm sorry, Taylor Moore. I get him confused with Ryan Palmer. But Taylor Moore just doesn't do well in difficult courses. He does okay putting on these type of greens. He's more of a birdie fest type of guy. And I think the reason you might have put him in Kamish is because of his latest trends. He's done okay at the Century, 25th, and his putting's okay, but off the tee and tee to green and approach has not been great. So I wouldn't play Taylor Moore. But if you have a gut feeling and you feel like he's going to do well, put him in, just smidgen. Fading Cantley, I think this is a possible good play for his price. If you want to fade Cantley, I think that's fine. I think Cantley just uses the first half of the year to kind of get his swing together, which is why he did +4 at the Amex. There's no way Cantley can hit +4 at the Amex. I mean, it's too easy of a course. Unless he was just fucking around. And we already talked about Theegala. I think Theegala is not a fade play here. I think you can fit him in more of a value play in one of your more higher price lineups.
Well, there you have it. Kamish13, a little rundown on your question from Twitter. And for those of you who are following along, the question was, how do we feel about a specific lineup with favorites being Homa, Morikawa, and Day, which we've pretty much touched on these, except for Morikawa, who is a California guy. I feel like that's a decent, not just decent, that's a pretty good bet. Unsure of Finau, English, Straka, and more. Adam spent a great deal of time on that. Finau is also in my pools pretty heavily. Fading Cantley and Theegala, I think it's too early to fade Theegala. Cantley, I can probably do without, but I can't give up on Theegs yet.
I mean, at the price of 7,800, you're not risking much. With Cantley, you're risking a little bit.
You're risking more.
Yep.
Agreed. But what's really interesting is if you have found that you're spending far too much money like me, why pay up for Theegala at 8.7 when you can have Beau Hossler at 7.6? Beau Hossler, what? I just happen to think this is going to be a good tournament for Beau Hossler, and the data stands beside that as well. Theegala, 65% chance to make the cut. That's good. Beau Hossler at $1,000 less, $1,100 less, 66% chance of making the cut. And they're both going to make about the same amount of points. 61.7 fantasy points are projected for Theegala. 61.9 fantasy points projected for Hossler. 18% of managers are going to be playing Theegala. 9.4% of managers are going to be playing Beau Hossler. So I'm giving you some good options. If you have spent far too much money, can't fit in Theegs, think about Beau Hossler. The other one, which I find really interesting, because you mentioned Rose and you mentioned Theegala. So again, spend too much money, can't fit in Rose, 8.3K. Spend it on Taylor Montgomery, 7.4K. They're both on, fairly low rostership. Rose, 8% of rosters. Taylor Montgomery, 6% of rosters. But you're saving $900 in your salary cap. They're both projected for 53 fantasy points. But here's the difference that I found to be super interesting. Justin Rose, 53 fantasy points projected. That is 10 fantasy points fewer than those in his pricing tier. So that's a little terrifying for me. Whereas the 53 fantasy points projected for Taylor Montgomery are in his price point. Thoughts?
Those are all good things to bring up.
Thank you.
I think those are good things to bring up, especially, but when you start to look at these like percentage of rosterships, it's good to look at like the fantasy points projected, but also good to look at like what their possible ceiling could be. And so a lot of these, like, I'll say Rose and Taylor Montgomery probably have similar ceilings, which is why Rose has a 53 fantasy points projected at 8.3. But I'd say Theegala's ceiling is a little bit higher than the Hostlers.
Yeah.
That being said, I think these are great points to bring up that Taylor Montgomery might be a better pick. And he did okay at the Amex. Again, I think the Amex is just there to help fix your swing. Like, yeah, we'll give you 3 chances to make the cut. Play all the rounds you want. So I think Taylor Montgomery's are pretty good.
I really like doing this because one of my favorite things is kind of finding an anomaly in the data. It served me so well during the fantasy season, especially among defenses, and looking at how many fantasy points were projected for the defense in relation to their pricing tier. So I'm kind of adopting that now in our golf season, and it feels good. I kind of like it. So I'm
There's
looking
defense
at
in golf, or do you mean fantasy football?
in fantasy football. Duh. But yeah, I like looking now at that same kind of anomaly. They're projected for what in comparison to what I'm paying for, and then I find that same projection in my spreadsheet at a much lower price, and kind of it feels really good. Just it feels good. Feels like you're finding a secret.
Yeah, and the one thing is that the thing I picked up on, because I looked into the same thing, is that if the rostership is just a smidgen, like if it's below 5%, you're not on a secret. You're on a different path on the corner, more than likely. Because you're really trying to throw a dart in the middle of.
Well, this is 6%.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying like usually 6% to 8%, you're on to like, okay, yeah, I got some value here.
You're not wearing like a tinfoil hat.
Yeah. Like if you're in the 7s and you see a rostership of like 6 to 10%, that means that guy's got some value. He has a high ceiling. People see the same too. If you're less than 5% in the 7 range or lower, like get yourself up.
Yeah.
Like, if you're starting at DFS, that's a little bit too low to be trying to stick with theories.
Very true. But another one that fell kind of in that same kind of theory was Luke List. So you already mentioned him. I like him. He has the distance. He has the approach. 60% chance to make the cut. 57 projected fantasy points. I think he's a solid pick. We've already talked about him. But I also like Alex Smalley, and that's where I'm ending this week. 7.2K. I think Alex Smalley has what it takes this week to get it done. I'm a little nervous about his putting, but all of the data really seems to like bringing Alex Smalley to the top as a value pick. And again, he's also one of those that stands out in his tier. So Alex Smalley, more value, less money.
I like it.
Awesome. Do you have any other players you want to talk about this week?
Well, I have one. And he's sticking out at 6,800. And it's Mr. Joseph Bramlett.
Oh, yeah.
He has good history here. He's decent history. Ever since 2020, he's made the cut. He hasn't missed a cut yet. Knock on wood. The old Jim Nance curse. He was tied for 13th last year. Barely made the cut 2022. He was tied for 18th in 2021. He did okay 2020. Now, that being said, at 6,800, if we're going by patterns, it means he's going to be in the middle of the pack. But at 6,800, I take it. And we're just going based on course history here. He's not great in putting and on Poa annua greens. He's just not great at putting at all. I mean, he's at 29.4, which is similar to Keegan. His driving accuracy is not there. His driving distance is okay. His greens and regulation is outstanding. And so he's kind of all over the board a bit. So we're hoping that his approach and around the green kind of helps him out a bit. So, yeah. He missed the cut at the American Express, which I think he had minus 11 at that point in time. Like, if you shoot minus 11, good on you. It's fine. He did okay at Sunny Open. If you need somebody at 6,800 that makes the cut, it's going to be Joseph Bram. Don't expect them to be in the top 20. Don't expect them to be in the top 5. But if you need someone to fill out the expensive roster that you have, he's going to be your guy.
He's going to be your guy. I like it. If you're actually looking for some people to be in your top 20 and your top 5, definitely take a look at Xander Schauffele, who we mentioned. 60% chance of making the top 20. So that's going to be an easy bet, but it's also not going to yield you much money, I'm pretty sure. Surprisingly enough, even though I was not high on him, Cantlay is next, 52.7% to make the cut. Morikawa, we didn't really talk about.
The cut or make the top 20?
I mean, not make the cut. Top 20. Sorry, top 20. Colin Morikawa, 50.3% to make the top 20. We didn't really talk about him, but we did mention he's a California guy, likes the West Coast, does well. Weirdly enough, Max Homa, but you did mention he does well in the West, 47.6%. Sungjae Im, 44%. Those are our favorite, or not favorite, but those are the top 5 listed to projected to make the top 20. If that helps you at all, I am excited. I think many of the players we mentioned today will make the top 20. And if our results last week are any measure of that, shoot darn dang, we were very close. Average of 23rd place. What? Look at that. Love it. Thank you guys for tuning in this week. We'll be back again next week. The reason we were live tonight, you can still watch this tomorrow morning recorded before you lock it in, but you better get up early because this tournament begins tomorrow morning in California. So get it locked in tonight. Get it locked in super early tomorrow morning. Let us know how you do. You can find me at Kelly in Phoenix on the app formerly known as Twitter. You can find Adam at Mr. Hallas. We look forward to seeing you around. Have a great night. Bye.